Welcome to the next installment in our online series on how to use the Web Mountain Technologies RUC02 Remote Universal Controller. This session deals with how to set up triggers and use the control panel on the RUC02. Please bear with me when we get into the live demo part of the session, as it's not going to be too well structured and be a bit more free form. To access the Triggers menu from the user interface on the RUC02, on the left-hand side, click on Triggers. Think of triggers as an if-then, then-that type of operation. You'll see the trigger page here with triggers up at the top and various sections here in the page. Also, maybe a better way to think of this is that if this happens, then do that. Notice that there are three sections on the trigger screen: a receive section, a send section, and a list section, and we'll go through all of those. The receive section is what you would consider to be if this. So the top part of this trigger screen is the receive command, is the if this part, and you can see the three options there. There is a schedule option, a button option, and a command option. For a schedule option, if it is this time of day, then do whatever. For a button option, if this button on the control panel is pushed, then do whatever. And for a command option, if this UPB command is received on the power line, then again, do whatever. The send section, the send command section, is the section where you define what the action is to be taken. So that's the middle part of the screen. It's the then do part. There are 6 options here: a UPB direct, UPB link or scene, email, Ethernet, a get or post command, or set the mode. A UPB direct option this means to send a UPB device command. This only controls one device. It doesn't impact anything else. Whereas a UPB link command or a scene command sends a UPB scene or link command. This controls all the devices that are associated with that scene or link. Scene and link are interchangeable. Link is the old term that was used within the UPB ecosystem. More recently, Upstart's been changed to use the term scene. An email action would send out an email. An Ethernet action would actually send out an Ethernet command over the network. A get post action would send out a get or post command over the network. And the set mode action means you set the mode on the RUC to either home or vacation mode. And we'll go through these in detail. The trigger list is just a simple listing of all of the triggers that have been applied on the RUC unit, and the way you get to those is by clicking on the drop down next to the particular type. So for buttons there, if you wanted to see a button trigger, you would, right now it shows view none, you would click on view all in the drop down and you would see all the buttons, or you can actually decide if you want to see buttons for a particular page. Same thing with schedule, same thing with commands. If you notice on the right there's 3 buttons: run, edit, and delete. You can view the trigger in a simple format like it's shown here. If you edit it, it takes you back up into the full trigger page, and you can see all of the items that were entered, and you can modify those. You can run using the run button. So this, you don't get the trigger action, you just get the final action that occurs, and then you can delete the trigger from this section as well. The control panel is why you use button triggers. The buttons set up using the button triggers show up here. And these buttons also show up on the iOS and Android mobile apps. These buttons are mirrored from the control panel onto the apps. So we'll walk you through how we set up these buttons, and then in a different tutorial we'll show you how to actually set those up in the mobile apps. Alright, now let's demonstrate in creating some triggers. So I'm going to get out of this, and I'm going to go into a unit, a RUC unit. And here we have a RUC unit. We're at the home page. So to get into triggers, just come down on the left-hand menu and click on triggers. Now you see that screen that we had before. Triggers up at the top, receive command, send command, and the trigger list at the bottom. So let's just show you right now. There might be some various triggers down here. You can see what those would look like. If we click on that, we can see. Let's just go ahead and delete some of these triggers. So we deleted that. It'll bring you back to the main trigger page. We'll just delete all 4 of these. Notice it's asking us if we really do want to delete it. So it gives you an opportunity to change your mind before you actually deletes the actual trigger. Okay, so let's create some triggers now. We just deleted some, and you'll notice if I use this drop down under command type, and again we're under receive, I've got 3 options here. I've got schedule, button, and command. Let's start with the schedule trigger. And when we have the schedule trigger, you notice up here in the top section, the receive section, you have hours and minutes text blocks. You have use hours and minutes as actual time, time before sunrise, time after sunrise, time before sunset, time after sunset. You get to pick what days of the week you want it to run on, and you get to pick if you want to send it on schedule or randomize it. And then there's also, you can decide if you want it to run in the home mode, the vacation mode, or both. And I'll explain all of those. So let's go ahead and implement a simple time-based trigger. And let's say we want to turn on a lamp at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This is notice here it says 24-hour clock. So this has to be entered in, the hours in, at 24 hours. So 2 o'clock in the afternoon would be 14 hours. And let's say we want to do it at 15 minutes. So this would be 2:15 in the afternoon, or 14:15 on a 24-hour clock. But actually, before we go any further though, you must name the triggers. So this is a function where you have to put that in. So we'll say lamp on. So we're going to turn this lamp on at 2:15 in the afternoon, and we're going to use it as actual time. It's going to turn on every day of the week, and we're going to send it on schedule, and this is going to be impacted by both in home vacation modes. So once I set this all up, that's the if this part. Now I need to go down and set up the then do this part. So I've got multiple options: UPB direct, UPB link, email, Ethernet, get post, set modem. Let's just leave it at UPB direct. And you notice this has already been filled in as a network ID of 21, and that's because we did the export earlier from Upstart into the unit. So we only have the one device there, so it's kind of I shouldn't have used lamp on. Let's say this is going to be landscape on to match our device. So we'll do landscape on. And you notice when we selected that, the device ID showed up, and now I can select the commands down here, anything I want of UPB commands. We'll just go ahead and go with activate since we're turning it on. So I've set up a time for this trigger to turn on, gave it a name. I've decided, determined what commands I want to send, and then I'm going to add trigger. So we add the trigger there. And since this was a scheduled command, let's come down and verify that it actually added it. So we'll come down and click on View All. And there it is. We've got a landscape on running at 2:15 p.m. every day of the week, send on schedule. And this is the device that's being controlled, and the command is an activate. And notice it's a network ID 21. It's coming out on COM port 1, which was set right up here. And that's almost always what you're going to have here is a COM port 1, and then it shows that the mode is both. So I can run that command by clicking on that button, and it would automatically go ahead and turn the landscape lights on. or I can edit the command, or I can delete the command. If I edit the command, it just takes me immediately back here. I can do anything I want to. For example, I could change the name here to front landscape on. And then once you've done that, you go ahead and click on Save Edits. Before we do that, one comment I want to make is when you're naming this device, don't use any special characters. For example, quote marks. Quote marks especially are problematic. That can break the trigger screen using some special characters here. So just leave standard text and in there, and don't do anything special. Then go ahead and click on Save Edits. Now if we come down and click on our schedule, there it is, and it's front landscape on. All right. That was a very simple schedule program. Let's do one now that, let's say, turns on the landscape lights at 10 minutes before sunset. So in that case, I'm going to click on time before sunset here. But up here, my hours are going to be 0, and I'm going to put this at 10 minutes. So that would be 10 minutes before sunset. Hours, in this case, 0 hours is considered sunset. So we'll come up here and we'll call it sunset landscape on. And all that is correct. We've got all of this set up like that. Coming down here, we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did before. We're going to pick the device and go ahead and use a direct command. Command is activate, and we'll add the trigger. Let's go ahead and add another one that we're going to turn the lights off at exactly at sunrise. So I'm going to click on, and I could do this either with time before sunrise or time after sunrise. So we'll choose time before sunrise, and I'm going to leave these at 0, 0. That means to do it exactly at sunrise. Again, every day of the week, send on schedule. But now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to label it sunrise off, sunrise landscape off. Then I'm going to come down here. I'm going to change to my, actually, let's see, do I have a link here that we can use? And let's see. Yep. So in this case, let's use a link command rather than a direct command. We'll call it landscape. Notice it filled in the link ID. And we're going to go ahead and do a deactivate now since we're turning off. So network ID stays the same, but our link ID and our landscape in a deactivate command, and we'll go ahead and add the trigger. Okay, now come down and look at the schedules. And you'll see we've got 3 scheduled triggers here. Our original one that was just based on 2:15 in the afternoon. Here's where we turn them on at 10 minutes before sunset. And here's where we turn them off right at sunrise. So there's our 3 triggers showing up for you. You can do whatever you want to at that point. Edit, run, or delete. Now I mentioned you could randomize. All 3 of those we picked to send on schedule. If you entered a trigger and you selected random, that trigger then would run plus or minus 30 minutes around whatever time you had set up. So each day would be different, technically, and it's there to kind of give some variability, maybe making people think that the house is occupied. So it's not going, the lights don't turn on at 7 p.m. every evening, as an example. They might turn on anytime between 6:30 and 7:30 in that case. I don't know if you recall the famous Christmas movie Home Alone, where one of the crooks is out in front of a neighborhood and he's pointing to a house and said, okay, there's such and such's house, it turned on at 7. There's such and such's house, it turned on at 7:30. I mean, they had figured out that it was on a timer. Okay, that was a schedule trigger. Let's do a button trigger. And let's come down and let's view all. And so we have several button triggers down here already, if you notice. I'm going to not actually implement all of those, but I'm going to get rid of these 2 and We'll delete this one, and we'll delete this one. Okay, and then I'm going to come back over, and when we enter a button trigger, create a button trigger, those buttons are intended to show up on the control panel. And let me show you here. This is one of the capabilities of the control panel. You can actually rename the pages. So what you have on the control panel are 10 pages, 1 through 10, and you can label these any way you want to just by clicking on it and then typing in some name, whatever it is you want, and you'll notice it changes from whatever that is to the page number. But on each page you have the ability to put 10 buttons, 5 in this column and 5 in this column, and you have 10 pages, so you have the ability to have 100 buttons in the control panel. Now, each button is an action. So if you want to turn something on, you need a button for that. If you want to turn that same device off, you need a button for that. So let's go back in and we'll look at page 2. I'm going to just change this back to 2 at the moment. And we'll add our new buttons to page 2. So we go into triggers, we go into button, and we're going to call this button landscape on. You give it a trigger name, you also get to display the text that's on the button. So in many cases those can be the same thing. So I've done this before, so I'm going to call this one landscape on button. And I'm going to put that on page number 2, and I'm going to put it at button number 1. So you have the ability to put these buttons, create these buttons and put them on any page you want and put them in any of the 10 slots you want. So I'm going to call that landscape on. So this is the actual text that will show up on the button. This is just the trigger name up here. Okay, come down here and I get to choose what I want to happen when that button is pressed. So in this case I'm going to send out a link command, and I'm going to choose the landscape scene, and I'm going to do activate because we're turning it on. And I'll go ahead and add the trigger. Now let's add the turn off button. So I'm going to call this one the landscape off button. Again, I'm going to put it on page 2, but this time I'm going to put it on button 6. And the reason for that is so that they're side by side. The buttons are labeled 1 through 5 on the left and 6 through 10 on the right. And you'll see that when we go back to the control panel in just a second. So we're going to send the link command again. We're going to choose the landscape link. But in this case we're going to choose deactivate. Before I leave this screen, the one thing I did want to remind you of is notice that we've got other, scene 5, and landscape. Remember when we did the session on using Upstart with the RUC, we actually exported the UPE file from Upstart into the RUC. And that's how these names already showed up there. If you wanted to do something on your own and it didn't come across from Upstart, then you would select other here, and you would put in you can modify the lid or the link ID or the device ID, change the network ID if you wanted, and change the command, whatever you want to there. For this particular example though, we're still working on landscape. We're going to deactivate it, and I'm going to add the trigger to turn the landscape lights off. So now we can come down to the trigger list and we look at the buttons, and we're going to look at just page 2, and you'll notice there's our 2 buttons. We have landscape on, landscape off. It tells us what command is being sent and what button that's on there and what the text is. So you can again run it, you can edit or delete. Now let's come over to the control panel, and on page 2 you see landscape on, landscape off are 2 buttons. And let's actually go up here and rename this. Can't type today, sorry. Landscape as the page name. So now you can see that I've change that title, and when this shows up on your mobile device, that page, you would only see the one page, and it would be showing you that page titled as landscape. So that's button triggers. And let me show you, let's go back to page 1. We have some various buttons already set up over here. Let me go edit some of those and we'll show you what those look like. So let's look at page 1, and you'll notice we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons on here. There's 4 on the left hand side, 1 on the right hand side. So Ethernet, let's do an edit on the Ethernet. This is what a Ethernet command looks like. Again, the button, don't worry too much about that. This is showing you where it can go. But also notice that when you edit these, you can't change the command type in the edit. You can only change the details over here. So on button number 3 on page 1, we're sending out an Ethernet command, and in this case it would be, here is the remote IP address of the device we're trying to control, any port number that we need to send to control it, and then the actual data that we send. This is a real or a very close example of using a global cache Ethernet to IR converter to control a piece of audio video equipment. Here's the IP address of the global cache device, here's the port number we talk to it, and here's the data we send to it. The command is a send IR and then to, and then there's a bunch of data following after this. So this would be what an Ethernet command would look like. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. We'll come back down and look at page 1, and we'll show you a send email. So here is the send email command, and again you have to name the trigger. We've put it on page number 1, button number 2, and we're displaying send an email. And in this case the email is, here's the to address, sending it to sales@webmountain.com, and the email from address, I'm sending it from my personal WebMountain account, and the subject is test and the message is hello. You can't write a volume here, but you can put in a couple of hundred characters if need be in order to send an email command. So again, if you pressed button number 2 on page 1, it would send this email to that email address from this email address with this subject line and with this body, message body. And we'll come back down to this and we'll show you a post command. So again, we're editing. Again, you can't change the types over here. And I gave it a name of post. Now this one is on page number 1, button number 4, and the display text is post. I don't have a good example here. I think I've got another one in another location I'll show you in a minute. But you can choose whether that's a post, a get, a put, or a delete command, HTTP type. You put in the URL that you're sending to, and you put in the actual data. Then in some cases you need what's called headers, and you might need to authenticate it using a username and a password. And again, that's how you would do a simple post command. Alright, let's keep going. And that was a post command. Let me show you the mode command. What the mode command means is that the device, the RUC, can be put into a particular mode, whether it's a home mode or a vacation mode. So when you put it in the home mode, it would only run triggers that are set to run in the home mode. Same with vacation. If you put the RUC into the vacation mode, then you could only run triggers that are set up using the vacation mode. So what this does is it gives you a way to put the RUC into the home and vacation mode by either pressing a button on the control panel, or you could even set it up that if I see a command coming in on the power line, put the RUC into the home or vacation mode. And I'll show you an example of that in just a second. Now you might ask, okay, well how do I get the RUC into the home or vacation mode? You come up to the device configuration page, and you'll notice right here, home, vacation. In this case, we've got the the RUC into the home mode. If you wanted to put it in vacation mode, you just put it there. And again, the purpose of this is that you could run different triggers based upon whether you're home or you're on vacation. Now, coming back to the triggers, what this one is doing is putting it into, this gives us a button to be able to put the device into the home mode. Let's go into the control panel. If you clicked on this button, this would tell the RUC to go into the home mode. If you pressed on this button, the vacation button, this would tell the RUC to go into the vacation mode. So when this gets mirrored on your smartphone, it's an easy way to be able to put the system into home or vacation mode. Okay, so let's go back into triggers. That was the button trigger. Let's go into the command trigger. Okay, what this means is that it's the RUC is actually sitting there and monitoring all commands on the power line. So if it sees a particular command show up, then you type in what that command is, or the trigger name, and then what the command is, and then you can put a delay on it if you want, and then you tell it what command to send. And let's see, I might already have one. I have one set up here, and I'll come back and look at that in a minute. For the short term, let's put in a new command. So let's put in, we'll call this test all, or test all on. Okay, the regex for that is going to look something like this. And this is the actual ASCII hex representation of a UPB command. And where can you might ask, okay, where do I find that command? Well, one place to find it is to look over here at the receive table. This is logging all UPB commands it sees on the network. And you can you could go up and press a button that would send your particular command, then you could go and copy it from the receive command. However, if you have problems getting what you want, don't hesitate to send me an email or call me, and I'll help you figure that out. Now, you also can notice that these commands have two characters in front of them, a PU. That's an acknowledgement command coming just from the serial PIM connected to the RUC unit. The actual command is after the PU right here. So when you're creating a trigger, a command trigger, what you want to do, and let's do test all on, and I'm going to put in this particular command right here. Notice I didn't put in the PU. You don't need that PU command. Now, one way this would work, as an example, let's say that something triggered, like a motion detector triggered a command to turn all your lights on at night. Then you want that to automatically turn off on its own after some period of time. So you come over here and you put the delay in that you want. And for example, this would be 30 seconds. So when that command came on, what I'm saying is delay 30 seconds, and then after 30 seconds, send this command. And we'll take a scene 5 as an example, and we'll tell it to deactivate. So when it receives this all on command, wait 30 seconds and then send out this command to turn off certain lights. And then you just click on add trigger. Come down here, you do a view all, and you can see my test all on. And here's the pattern that it's matching, the command that it's received, and here's the command that it sends back out. Now let's look at another option here. And I'm going to edit this command. This is a funny looking command. Notice it's 8900, or pardon me, 89.0101.20. And an asterisk. The dots are wildcards. When you put a dot in there, that means you can put anything. It will ignore whatever that character is. It knows there's a character there, and it will look at the character, but it's going to ignore it. It's not going to try to match it. It's only going to try to match the characters that are not dots: the 8, 9, the 0, 1, the 0, 1, and the 20. Now, this asterisk is a different wild card, and what that means is you have to put in one dot after your last interesting character, and then the asterisk tells it ignore any characters past that. So there could be 6, 7 characters past this last dot, and it will ignore all of those. It won't ignore the fact that they're there. It just doesn't care what they are. It's only going to try to match the 8, 9, the 0, 1, the 0, 1, and the 2, 0. So that makes it a lot easier. You know what it is that you're trying to match to. You know, for example, that the network ID is 01. You know that the destination ID is 01. And you know the command is a 20, which is an activate. 20 is an activate command. So that's what the command triggers do, and how you can use wildcards in that for that particular capability. Okay, let's get out of that and come down now into the send command, and we'll talk about those just for a minute. When I gave you a pretty good introduction to those when we were looking at the button triggers, but let's just walk through this so you can see how the send command changes based on what this selection is. So for a UPB direct or a device command, you have again the network ID. You need to know what the device ID is, and hopefully you've imported from Upstart and you can get it, but if not, you can just choose other device and put it in here, and then you get to choose the command that you want from this list of commands, and then you click on add trigger. Then we have a UPB link or a scene command, and you've seen that already. It's the same thing. If you've imported from Upstart, you've got a list of all your scenes over here. You select it, and then you select the command that you want for that scene as well, and then add trigger. Email, we talked about the email to address, the from address, the subject, and the message. Ethernet, again, you put in the IP address of the device you're requesting action from, whatever port it is you want to talk to it on, and then the actual data. Get post, we talked about that. You can do a post, get, put, delete, and you have to put in a URL, data, headers. Headers are optional, user and password are optional as well, just if you need them. And then how you would set the mode, home or vacation. And this would typically be used with a button. You probably wouldn't use that with a schedule, but you might use it with a command. You could send a command from a wall mount controller, for example, to put the unit into the home or the vacation mode. Let's look at a couple of other triggers. Let's see, I don't think I have any. Let's see, where did I put those? I think they're under here. We'll do a view all. Okay, let's edit this one. Here is a good command that shows you the use of a get and a post, or a post command. So in this case, I've set up a button on the control panel, and this is to control a Yamaha receiver. This is an actual example from one of our RUC owners and users. So trigger name is test Yamaha. It's on page number 5, button number 6. The display text we're seeing is test Yamaha. We're going to send out a post command, and the URL that we're going to is just the IP address, and then the data being sent is all of this information, which you can get from the user manual or online user manual for the other equipment that you're trying to talk to. So if we go and look at the control panel on page 5, and you see here's the test Yamaha button. So when I click on that, it sends that post command that I've just showed you under the triggers. Let's look at another one. Here's where I was actually testing a very long string to see what we would get here. It's another post command. Well, here's the, and I showed you the Ethernet command earlier. So anyway, that's the the use of triggers and how you set triggers up and how you're able to use the control panel and able to change anything that you might want to, like that, page titles, anything like that. Very powerful, flexible programming. And again, what you see on the control panel gets mirrored to our apps. The apps, the only setup you actually have to do in the app is to tell it where to find what IP address you're going to for the RUC and your username and password, and then it just pulls all of these, and you'll get 10 buttons on the app, and each page with the ability to have 5 buttons on the left and 5 buttons on the right. So at this point, we've kind of gone through triggers in the control panel. I'd like to invite you to take a look at our next session in this series of talks on the RUC02, and the topic for that session will be using the RUC02 with Amazon Alexa. Thanks.